It's Mike Brennan. We're doing another segment on well, it's called M2 TechCast originally, but now we just call it MITechTV. And we're recording this on June 22nd. And I have with me my business partner, Melih Oztalay. And for those that have been watching, Melih is really heavily into artificial intelligence for B2B. And so I have the luxury of seeing what he wants to talk about, but I'm going to let him take it from here. Melih, introduce yourself as to where you're from and all that, and then go into your
Yeah.
PowerPoint slides.
Good to be on the show again, Mike. It's actually been a few months. I was checking my notes. I think the last time I was on the show was March. And the reason I'm bringing that up is there's been a lot of things that changed in the last three, especially in the area of marketing, strategy, and with AI. And so lots of interesting things to talk about. I'm going to go through a presentation this time instead of just randomly talking. A lot of it has to do with the fact that um, AI and marketing has changed. I can't even begin to tell you how much. I mean, it's across every industry. Um, and it's probably moved faster than most companies realize. Large, and what I mean by that, and this is the focus of today's conversation, is how has AI changed how buyers discover and evaluate products and services or brands and companies. And that's where the difference is in terms of where we are today. So if we take a look at it from the standpoint of a business, most companies are still investing in marketing the old way. They're running campaigns, they're creating content, they're experimenting with AI. And I definitely am using the word experiment because they're not fully engaged in AI yet. Um, we're talking about we're not getting the results that we expected, right? It's like the same old excuse. And they're still trying to fuss with SEO and advertising and email and so on and so forth. And more importantly, and I'm not saying everybody does this, but nonetheless, a lot of companies still operate all these different channels independently of each other, not necessarily as a cohesive strategy. And so, if we look at the fact that today's buyers don't experience marketing and channels, it changes the whole perspective of what we're doing. Many companies are still disconnected from this whole process. They really need to get with it. Um, Again, I mentioned a little bit ago, companies believe they've adapted to AI, and honestly, they still have not. I think that it's one of those things where um, the execution, they've redesigned the marketing system around the way buyers may research or make decisions, but it's not fully implemented. And I think this is where the issue is. Many organizations do believe that they are stuck, but they still haven't figured out what to do, and they haven't adopted the tools that they really need to adopt in order to change the infrastructure of what it is that they're doing. So what we end up doing is having an old model versus new model mentality going on over here. I think the best thing I can suggest, there was a Fast Company article just last week, and it's really honed in on this idea that the traditional marketing funnel no longer reflects how many buyers are actually buying anymore. Um, in other words, buyers are now going to um, ChatGPT. They're going to online reviews. They're validating information across multiple sources, and AI is helping them run it faster and and more efficiently than ever before. So, if we look at this from this standpoint, the old model assumed buyers would follow a path that we, as the marketers or the company, have created. That's no longer true. The new model is about the buyers arriving already informed. They already know what they want. If they come to your doorstep, they already made the decision. There's nothing more to talk about, to be perfectly honest with it, than the fact that, can you sell them on the last leg, the last mile of what's going on. So that's kind of the world that we're living in now. And that Fast Company article, I thought, did a phenomenal job in terms of what this looks like. Um, So what we've been doing is we're trying to figure out what's the relationship and what we're nowadays calling the semantic relationship across all these channels, across all the content. And the idea is to look at, and more importantly, viewing modern marketing in a completely different scenario. So we're talking about strategy, we're talking about infrastructure, whether or not the business has authority, can they validate what they're talking about? And more importantly, if you can take the first four layers and figure out, can you convert the people, that your target ICP, your ideal customer profile? And so the idea is, don't treat these as separate initiatives. And I think that's where businesses haven't quite caught on yet. It's not that businesses won't, but again, I go back to the idea that you need to move fast. You really can't sit around thinking, geez, should I do this? That's not the question anymore. It's, geez, I should do this and I need to push this forward. And so, how do we get companies to move faster? I guess that's the issue. Um, and they're having a very difficult time with this because, geez, like I said earlier, I was on the show 3 months ago, and I don't know that I was ready to talk about today's topic in the same way that I am today as I would, as maybe March. Here we are 3 months later, and the world has changed. Traffic alone doesn't create results anymore to your website. The website experience matters more importantly than ever before. The user experience matters, and the conversion process matters. So those three things haven't changed, but what has changed is whether or not the visitor is coming with already having made the decision. And so, if we think about the fact that they're finding us through AI, I mean, let's take a look at Google. You search for something, what's the first thing you get up top? The Gemini AI results, followed by the sponsored ads. And nowadays, organic listings are below the fold. I mean, talk about a whole different world and how things have changed. It's just not the way it used to be. So let's talk about authority and validation, or authority, visibility, validation. I mean, these are ultimately the pillars of this whole process nowadays. AI systems and buyers both look for validation. So they're comparing information across multiple sources. Of course, AI is doing all the work, and the buyers are just feeding from AI. And so that what we're saying is, authority on its own is no longer sufficient. It's what others say about you. It's whether or not AI can verify the information. And of course, it can't sit there and verify it on some, fly by night operation website. It's going to pass that. You have to have your information on high domain authority websites. So, for example, when we do the press release marketing, we're running it through ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox, CNN, financial networks, trade publications, right? These are high domain authority websites. This is the notable website that AI is looking for, but it also wants to see the information on multiple locations simultaneously. So this is one reason why earned media, industry mentions, for example, if the CEO was quoted in an article someplace, thought leadership and third-party validations are becoming more and more important. This is the world that we're living in. And like I said before, it's like you just have to get on the bandwagon. You can't sit around waiting anymore. You might, I think we all understand SEO. What we don't all understand is AEO and GEO. And so in 2013, Google launched the Hummingbird algorithm. And in 2013, the Hummingbird algorithm was the beginnings of AEO. It was the beginnings of people searching and your website having to answer those questions. Can your website answer a question? Because no longer were people just saying, I'm doing a search on 3 or 4 words. They were using voice and, you know, talking a whole paragraph into Google, and Google's trying to figure out, well, who's it going to answer this particular question? And that's the world that we live in right now. We're still in the AEO phases. It hasn't gone away, and so your website has to revise how it is telling its story. how it's answering questions relative to your products and services. And then we move into GEO. This is where citations and AI generated responses. This is about your website having the appropriate code that AI is looking for. It's actually the same code that Google wanted. It's very similar to what Wikipedia was looking for. It is very similar to nowadays in terms of schema and what we call JSON coding that you need in every page of your website. And this whole GEO process is your website's one piece of the puzzle, and everything else that's outside of your website is the other piece of the puzzle. I'm going to try to get through this quickly. I'm not trying to spend a lot of time on these things. But when companies improve their visibility, their authority, and their conversion together with several, when those three things come together, several things are going to happen. You're going to have more qualified opportunities. You're going to have better sales conversations. I should have said conversions. You're going to have a shorter sales cycle. That's important. And more importantly, you're going to have a higher trust before the first meeting ever begins. And so this is the world that we're trying to move towards. And it's about, you may heard a lot of consultants talk about clarity, right? And that's kind of the direction that we're moving towards right now. But ultimately, and I'm going to skip through this real quickly. We have to talk about the fact that AI is not a future consideration; it's a current factor. The real question isn't whether your organization is using AI. The real question is whether your marketing system is structured to either benefit from it, and along with the fact that you're feeding it. So if we look at, again, I'm going to refer back to that Fast Company article because I thought it was great. Buyers are changing, search is changing, and more importantly, visibility is changing. The fact that the organic results are below the fold nowadays raises a significant question of whether or not you need to worry about ranking anymore. It's more about whether or not you can AI engines, whether it's Gemini, ChatGPT, Claude, etc., are able to cite you, reference you when somebody's looking for information inside um, of any of these AI engines. And with that, I'm going to stop because I don't want to take up too much time. But that's kind of the broad stroke over here. Buyers are changing how they find you. The ultimate result is when they come and find you, they already know why they're there. You have to get them over the finish line.
Okay, that's a whole different way to sell, isn't it?
Very different. Very, very different. In other words, your level of competition has changed at this point. In other words, and I should say this, whoever invests in the process to get their word out there, their thought leadership, their content, increase their visibility, increase their editorial content in notable websites, that's who's going to win. And, we talked about this 20 years ago. We talked about this 25 years ago. Content is king. And I, I swear that has not changed. In fact, it has become even more important now than it did back then.
Okay. Well, so how can people reach out to you, Melih, and tap your expertise?
So, like I always say, best place to reach me is on LinkedIn. I'm going to be the only Melih Oztalay there. There's nobody else there, and I have my name written out here in the Zoom session. Um, I do have almost 24,000 close friends on LinkedIn, so feel free to tag me. I'm happy to react, comment, put some hashtags into your posts and help amplify it. That's usually the best place to find me is on LinkedIn.